Everyone, and welcome to today's Consumer Advisory Committee meeting. I am Kayla Hernandez Ulloa with the Consumer Affairs and Outreach Division in the Consumer Affairs and Governmental Bureau, and I'd like to introduce our Chief, Alejandro Rourke, who will present remarks. Alejandro.
Thanks, Kayla. Good afternoon. It is always a really great time to have everybody around the table, so thank you all for taking the time, making the journey to be here with us today. For those of you that flew in, thank you so much. We know it's a lift. And for all of you guys that are joining us online, thank you for joining us virtually. I think anybody can tune in at fcc.gov/CAC maybe, or for sure on the FCC YouTube channel. So you can tune in, but I guess if they're seeing this, they're already tuned in, right? Okay. So thank you all for joining us for our third meeting of the year. We look forward to seeing your report that explores the implications of emerging artificial intelligence technologies on consumer privacy and protection, including how AI can help vulnerable consumer populations from unwanted and illegal calls, along with other consumer protection issues. We are thankful for all of the CAC members and all of your hard work this year to help us synthesize this important and timely topic, as well as preparing our report to the FCC on behalf of the Consumer Advisory Committee. And I know that those reports are always a lift, so I know all the work that goes into it. So I want to just extend a special thank you to Claudia Ruiz and John Braille. Your leadership and ongoing support as co-chairs of the CAC has led us to today and to kind of like the vote on this report. So again, just want to appreciate everybody's efforts because I know that it's work. It's not all fun. So your recommendations as a collective body representing industry, consumer organizations, and diverse community-based organizations really carry weight in forming a full body of knowledge for the record for the Commission on these critical topics. With this in mind, I wanted to mention, as previously discussed in your working group calls, the Federal Communications Commission on August 8th released a notice of proposed rulemaking and notice of inquiry that proposed new rules to protect consumers from the abuse of AI in robocalls and robotext, alongside actions that clear the path for positive uses of AI, including its use to improve access to the telephone network for people with disabilities. In addition, the Commission seeks comment and information on developing technologies that can alert consumers to unwanted or illegal calls and texts, including AI-generated calls. And on September 10th, a summary of the TCPA AI notice of proposed rulemaking and notice of inquiry was published in the Federal Register, which sets out new deadlines for comments to be filed by October 10th, and reply comments must be filed by October 25th. So I underscore that proceeding and those dates because this comment period represents another avenue for input from the general public that will inform again, the development of a full body of knowledge and really kind of give us all the information that we need in the Commission, the information that it needs to be able to thoughtfully engage on artificial intelligence, its impact on robocalls and robotext. And so we look forward to not only, I think, digesting everything in your report, but also all the comments that you will hopefully come in as a part of that proceeding. So I also want to end with a quick kind of reminder that CAC Session 12 Charter comes to an end in October, and we are currently reviewing applications that have gone out. I'm sure you guys have gotten a lot of emails and calls from David and Kayla, who are the DFOs and deputy DFOs. So thank you for all the current CAC members that have re-upped their interest in serving again. And for all of those that are interested, please feel free to reach out to Kayla or David, or what's the CAC what website where they can submit applications?
CAC@fcc.gov.
Got it. Okay. Everybody hear that? www.fcc.gov/CAC?
CAC@fcc.gov.
Okay, want to make sure I get that right.
We can answer your questions, Kayla. Yes.
Okay, great. So again, thank you for your service on CAC 12 to everybody that's here today, both in person and virtually, and for working collectively to produce a report by diverse stakeholders to contribute to, again, the full body of knowledge that will inform the Commission's work going forward. So at this time, I am happy to hand it over to our CAC co-chairs, Claudia Ruiz and John Braille, for the roll call. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Alejandro. Before we get into the roll call, just on behalf of myself and Claudia, I'd like to just give a word of thanks to all of the staff here at FCC who helped us get to today. So Kayla and David, our indefatigable DFO and DDFO, Miriam and Alejandro, and so many other people here at the CAC, including the DFOs we started off with, Kara Grayer and Diana Coho. They did a ton of work to help us, first-time co-chairs, I think, get us through this process, both in terms of helping us arrange meetings like this, getting all the technology happening for them, which is not a small task, getting all the accessibility technology together to help these happen, and just being professionals throughout the entire process, really answering all of our questions, giving us gentle nudges when we needed it. And I think, without them, I think the recommendations that we're going to present to you today would not be as good as I think they are. So if I could just ask for a quick round of applause for all of our FCC staff for all their hard work. Yes, and sorry, Alejandro reminded me, it's more than just the people I named. There are people here in the commission meeting room who have helped us get through security, who got us checked in, who are running the tech today, doing the transcription. So appreciate all of their hard work as well. Claudia, did you want to say anything before I sort of start on the roll call?
I think you're good.
Okay. Good. So just a couple of logistical notes. I think all of you should have the mics in front of you. Just remember when you speak so that folks who are listening in online can hear you, that you press the red button and the red light is on when you start speaking. This is going to be a fairly short meeting today, about 2 hours, so we have not built in any time for sort of breaks. But if you do need to get up and go out, I think the restrooms are just outside the doors. And if you need more water, there's more over in the corner back there. So any questions about any of that before we get started with the roll call and the rest of the agenda? No? Okay. Great. So what I'm going to do for the roll call here, and this is what we did at our last meeting. We've got a list here. I'll call your name out, and then because we have folks in the audience and online who could benefit from it, for myself at least, I'm going to sort of describe myself for people who are blind or hard of or have visual impairments, just so that they know sort of who's the person that's speaking. So I will start. I am John Brayo. I'm the Vice President of Public Policy, Telecommunications and Fraud at the National Consumers League, and I'm one of the co-chairs of the Consumer Advisory Committee. I'm a white guy with brown hair, blue eyes, and I'm wearing a dark blue suit. So I will hand it off to my co-chair, Claudia.
Thanks so much, John. Good to be here with everybody. I'm Claudia Ruiz. I'm the Senior Civil Rights Analyst at Unidos US, and I'm the co-chair for this CAC. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a Latina with long, dark hair, wearing all black.
Great. Dawit Kasai.
Hi, I'm Dawit Kasai, Government Affairs Director at AARP. I'm African American, and I'm wearing a navy blue suit. Yes, it is.
Oh, okay.
Dawit Kasai, Government Affairs Director at AARP. I am an African American, bald, wearing a navy blue suit.
Good afternoon. I'm Brian Hurley. I'm Chief Regulatory Counsel for ACA Connects. I'm a white guy with a gray suit and glasses.
John. Okay. So John Yang's alternate is Nicole Morgenstern.
I'm Tech Telecom Associate Media Manager with Asian Americans Advancing Justice, AAJC.
Great. Linda Vanderloop.
Hi, Linda Vanderloop, AT&T, white female with reddish hair and glasses and a black blazer.
Great. Cody Dorsey. I'm missing Cody. Okay. Amina Fazlullah. Mina with us today? Our alternate? No, okay. Rachel Nemeth.
Hello, Rachel Nemeth with the Consumer Technology Association. I'm a white woman with red hair wearing a black blazer.
Great.
Thank you.
Mickey Slimp.
Mickey Slimp with the Deep East Texas Council of Governments, Broadband Consultant Manager. I am a white male wearing a blue suit and very little hair.
Great. Brent.
Hi, I'm Brent Welks. I'm the Senior Vice President for Hispanic Federation. I'm a white male with brown hair, brown eyes, and a blue shirt.
Great. Lindsay.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm Lindsay Stern. I'm an attorney and policy manager with Encompass, which is the Internet and Competitive Networks Association. And I have brown curly hair, and I'm wearing a blue and white striped shirt.
Fantastic. Jocelyn.
Good afternoon, Jocelyn Day. I'm with the Massachusetts Department of Telecommunications and Cable. I'm the Consumer Division Director. We're the state regulatory agency. I'm an African-American woman wearing glasses with blonde and brown highlights.
Fantastic. Kenley.
Good afternoon. My name is Kenley Joseph. I am the Tech and Telecom Policy Counsel at the Multicultural Media, Telecom, and Internet Council, and I'm wearing a navy suit with braided locks.
Fantastic.
Mitsuko Herrera with the NATOA, the National Association of Telecommunications Officers and Advisors. I am a mixed race woman, over 40, and I am Asian, Latina, and white, and I am wearing a black blazer. And I'm very excited to be here.
Awesome. And it shows. Olivia.
Hello, Olivia Wine, she, her pronouns, a staff attorney at the National Consumer Law Center. Very small but mighty Asian with short peppery hair and glasses.
Great. And Ryan Johnson, who's the alternate from Next Century Cities, is here.
Good morning, or good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ryan Johnston, Senior Policy Counsel with Next Century Cities. I'm a white man with brown hair, blue eyes, wearing a black suit and purple shirt.
All right. I don't see Scott, so Debbie.
Hi, I'm Debbie Berlin, Executive Director of Project Goal, the project to get older adults online. I have blonde hair, I'm a white woman, I have blue eyes, and I'm wearing a blue jacket. And I'm also excited to be here.
Great. So let's see. I don't see Tina.
Can you hear me?
Oh, Tina's online. Hi, Tina. Go ahead.
Good afternoon. I'm Tina Metzer, co-founder of Rural Rise, the National Center for Resource Development. I am a white woman with long brown hair, and I have a brown dress on today, and I'm also excited to be here. Thank you.
Fantastic. I hope somebody doesn't say they're not excited to be here. I mean, that would. Anne Marie.
Is this my? Can you hear me? Okay, I'm sorry. I'm Anne Marie Killian. I am CEO and President for TDI for Access. I am a white woman, late 50s, with brown hair and golden earrings, and I'm wearing a black blouse. Thank you.
Fantastic. Radhika. Oh, sorry, I skipped over some people. Go, Radhika, go ahead. I call on you, and then we'll go back.
Radhika Bhatt, Vice President and Associate General Counsel at NCTA. I'm a South Asian woman with curly black hair, glasses, and a purple dress.
All right. Lily, so sorry to skip you. Go ahead.
No worries. Lily Genghis, Chief Tech Community Officer at the Caper Foundation, where we focus on diversifying and creating a more inclusive tech ecosystem. I am a Latina woman with wavy hair, a lot of patterns, but covered with a with a black blazer.
Nice. Casey.
Good afternoon. I am Casey Pick. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm the Director of Law and Policy for the Trevor Project. I'm wearing a brown blazer today, dark red shirt, and brown hair. Very happy to be here.
Fantastic. And Josh.
Hi, everyone. Josh Berkey. I'm Vice President, Policy and Advocacy at U.S. Telecom. I'm also the Executive Director of the Industry Traceback Group. I'm a white male, and I'm wearing a tall white male and wearing a blue suit with a plain white shirt.
Great, thank you. Miriam.
Miriam Montgomery. I am the Consumer Affairs and Outreach Division Chief, and I am African American woman wearing glasses, tannish blazer. Thank you.
Fantastic. David?
Good morning, David Perez. I'm the National Community Impact Manager and CAOD and the Deputy DFO for this committee. He, him pronouns, glasses, Latino, bald head, blue jacket.
Kayla.
Hello, everyone. Again, I am Kayla Hernandez Ulloa. I am a Latina with dark brown hair. I'm wearing a black sweater today. I already mentioned one of my titles, and the other title I have is Designated Federal Officer for the CAC. Thank you.
Alejandro?
Okay, so to start off, I verified the URL. It's just fcc.gov/CAC. All of our information is available there in the future, so sorry about not remembering that. My name is Alejandro Rourke. I have the honor of serving as the chief of the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau. I am a Latino male in his 40s, wearing glasses and a blue blazer. Thank you.
And forgive me, Kristen, I think I skipped over you in the roll call, so if you could announce yourself.
Hi everyone, I'm Kristen Kelly, she, they pronouns. I'm the Director of Programs at LGBT Tech. I am a femme non-binary white person in their 30s. And my apologies, I'm going to stay off camera for today. I'm not feeling great, but happy to be here. Thank you.
And I think I also missed Faith Bautista.
Hi, I'm Faith Bautista. I'm a Filipina, Asian, wearing orange. I'm also excited, even though I'm here in California.
Great. And so thank you, everyone. I think I got everybody. Didn't miss anyone. Good. And so while you were kindly introducing yourselves, I was doing some quick math, and by my count, we have 23 CAC members present, which means we have a quorum. Fantastic. That means we don't have to call y'all back to vote. So that's good. Great. So I'm going to go ahead now and turn the mic back to Kayla, who's going to make a few remarks about our disability inclusion statement and some other announcements.
Thank you, John, and hello again, everyone. I will be repeating some things that you have already heard here before, but this is all to make this meeting as accessible to everyone as possible, including not only everyone here in the room, but our online audience. This is the final CAC meeting of the current charter. During today's meeting, the CAC will present a report on its recommendations per its charge and vote on those recommendations. You may have heard this before, but please note that if anyone needs to step out of the room, there are restrooms on either side of the doors. You could go left or right. Welcome to the headquarters for the FCC. If for members of the public, you're encouraged to submit questions or comments to livequestions@fcc.gov. I'll repeat that again, livequestions@fcc.gov. For those in the room, if you need to move your microphone, please lift it by the base. I notice most of you have already been doing that, but a gentle reminder, please use the button to the right to turn on and off your microphone. Please do not use the left button. Please turn on your microphone and identify yourself before commenting. Once you are done commenting, please turn your microphone off. Only one person has the floor at a time based on who the co-chairs have requested to speak. Please pace yourself and take pauses while speaking. This will allow for effective communication during the meeting. This meeting is open to the public, as I mentioned before, and for those that are on the live stream, please go to fcc.gov/live or the FCC's YouTube page to access the meeting while it is happening. We will be addressing public questions and comments during the public portion of the meeting. A recording of this meeting will be posted on the CAC's webpage at a later date. Due to the length of this meeting, as was mentioned before, there will not be a scheduled break, but please remember if you need to step out of the room, you are welcome to do so. Most of these rules also apply to the CAC members who are attending virtually. Those who are attending virtually should not use the hand-raising tool during this meeting, as it may shift videos across and down the screen, making it difficult for the interpreters or the deaf or hard of hearing participants to watch the active signer. If you have a question or comment for those that are online, simply turn on your video and leave your video on and wait to be called upon. When the CAC chair calls on you, please wait a few seconds while you are spotlighted for your video before making your comment. This is that portion of the housekeeping rules. I do want to take this time to thank my colleagues in the Consumer Affairs and Outreach Division for all their help and collaboration for organizing today's meeting. A special thank you to my Deputy Designated Officer, David Perez, who you will hear from later during this meeting. Thank you to the CAC co-chairs, John Brill and Claudia Reese, for all your leadership and efforts to putting this meeting together and for this term. Thank you also to the Office of General Counsel, the Committee Management Office, our Office of Media Relations, and of course the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau, Alejandro Rourke, Chief, and Miriam Montgomery, who is the Chief of Consumer Affairs and Outreach Division. And with that, I would like to turn the meeting back to John and Claudia.
Great. Thank you so much, Kayla. So now we're going to go into the meat of today's agenda, which is our presentation of the report and recommendations that you all worked so hard over the past, almost 6 months now to produce. You should all have received copies of the final report via email. I think I circulated that around to folks on last week. And I think, do we have printed copies in front? Yeah, so they're printed copies in front of all of you. So over the next hour or so, Claudia and I will walk the group through the timeline and the milestones that got us to where we are today, as well as discussing the charge that we received from the commission to produce the report. Then I will give a presentation about the recommendations that Working Group 1 developed and provide some context on each one of those recommendations. Once that's complete, I'll hand the mic over to Claudia to give a presentation on Working Group 2's recommendations. And once that's done, then hopefully we'll be in a position to move to a vote to approve the recommendations. In the interest of time, I know this is not a shy group, but since we do have a limited amount of time today, if you have questions, my ask is that we address those at the end of each of our presentations. So I'll talk about Working Group 1, and then Claudia will talk about Working Group 2. And if you would like to be called upon, we usually put your tent card up like this, but I will also accept flailing your arms in the air or shouting, "Hey, John," to call on you. So any questions about any of that and the process we're going to go through today before we get started? Great. Okay. Well, let me get the presentation up on the screen, which will help us sort of stay on the same page on this. How do I do that? Get the presentation. It's back there. Oh, it's not there. Okay. Oh, it's over there. Okay. I think I can do this. Which way do I point the clicker? There we go. I want to go back the other way. Bear with me. And one more. Oops.
It's like, where do you point?
What? No, want to get to, that does me? No, hold on. I'm just, we're here. Okay. President?
No. Working group.
No. Yeah, there should be one before that. There we go. Okay. That was there. And now we should have timeline. Nope.
I think maybe the timeline one's missing.
Timeline one's missing. Okay. So real quick before we sort of get into the charge letter, I'll just run us through some of the key dates that we had as we produced this. So starting way back in September 2022, this CAC was rechartered. On February 20th of this year, Chairwoman Rosenworcel relaunched the CAC and you all had the pleasure of being named as members of the CAC, and we were told that our focus was going to be on consumer issues, including AI. On March 28th, we received our charge letter from the CGB, and we had our first full CAC meeting on April 4th. At that meeting, we heard presentations from FCC staff on key consumer issues and the AI proceeding. We had discussion about how to structure ourselves. We self-organized our working groups into 2 working groups. One was on technical issues related to the charge letter, and the other was on outreach and education issues related to the charge letter. We had our second full CAC meeting on June 26th. That was a virtual meeting where we received presentations from an AI expert as well as from FCC enforcement staff who talked to us about the FCC's enforcement action taken about the Biden voice cloning issue in New Hampshire. And the working groups provided updates. This month, after many meetings and lots of emails, the working groups delivered our final report and recommendations to the FCC, which brings us to today. Throughout that process, I think we recognized early on that there was a wide spectrum of expertise on the CAC about AI generally. So one of the things we tried to do at both the working group levels and the full CAC meeting levels and in our offline communications was to create opportunities for level setting about the topics that we were given to look into from the charge letter. And so, as always, many thanks on all of that to the team at FCC who helped us find those experts, who helped us sort of think through these issues, find the citations from CFR to note. So it's very much appreciated there. Oh, and there we go. So the charge letter. The Commission charged the CAC with developing a report based on 6 specific prompts. Those prompts were number 1, how the Commission can help prevent AI from being used for malicious calling purposes. 2, how AI is being used to help consumers avoid unwanted robocalls and robotexts. Number 3, how the Commission could encourage such uses. 4, how AI is being used to enable people with disabilities to make calls. 5, how the Commission can encourage those uses consistent with the requirements of the TCPA and ensure that future anti-robocall work does not deter those uses. And then finally, what outreach and education should be conducted in order to keep consumers informed about the development of these technologies and applications. As I mentioned at the April 4 meeting, we decided to divide and conquer by setting up these 2 working groups. At the same time, I think we recognized that there's a lot of intersectionality among these questions. And so while Working Group 1 primarily focused our work on questions 1 through 3, we also had input onto questions 4 and 5. And while Working Group 2 primarily focused on question 6, your input was definitely, I think, reflected in the responses we had to questions 4 and 5. So, Working Group 1, what have we done for the past 6 months? We have come up there we go. Hello. So Working Group 1, briefly on our process. There were 17 participants in our working group. They represented a broad spectrum of CAC member organizations from industry, from consumer groups, from civil rights groups, as well as disability advocacy organizations. As I mentioned, we gave a lot of focus to charge letter questions 1 through 3. We've had 9 working group meetings since May 2024. And throughout the process, I did want to recognize that everybody in the working group really made a commitment to a consensus-driven drafting and editing process. We had a lot of conversations. Some were easier to agree on than others. We did a lot of wordsmithing to make sure that everybody was comfortable. And I know many of the folks in the working group took time out of their days, particularly at the end of the process, to vet the questions and the language and the recommendations we were coming up with your members and industry associations, came back to us with thoughtful content and that was reflected in the recommendations. I also want to thank all the folks who took time to actually do the copy editing on this report, because it's a big report, and I do appreciate all the hard work that went into that. So, some of the themes that sort of overlaid all the recommendations that we came up with. First, establishing definitions was, I think, we recognized that was really important. So the terms in the charge letter are ones that I think are very easy to disagree on. What do those things mean? What does artificial intelligence mean? What does malicious calling purpose or unwanted robocall and robotext mean? And so I think we spent a fair amount of time early on agreeing on working definitions. We tried to stick with what definitions the FCC has used for these in the past, and I think that was really helpful to centering our conversation and helping us all sort of sing from the same hymnal in terms of like knowing what we're talking about when we say things like artificial intelligence. There was broad agreement on the need to stick to the scope of the FCC's charge. As I said, the AI is a gigantic issue. There seems like every day I turn the page and I find some new organization is being stood up to talk about what AI is and what AI is going to do and how do we influence AI, and not just in the context of the FCC, but in the context of many, many other agencies and businesses. So I think we recognize that sticking to what the FCC gave us to do was the best way to make sure we didn't, we made best use of our limited time together. And then I think finally, a theme that I saw going through all of our conversations was that AI is being used by both good and bad actors in this space, and that recognizing that fact was going to be something that we needed to have reflected in the recommendations that we came up with. And so I appreciate, again, I think everybody pitching in and kind of sticking to those themes and helping us come up with good recommendations. So what I'll do now is just basically go through each of the 9 recommendations that Working Group 1 produced, and offer a little context on what these words, how we came up with these words, and some of the things that we talked about in the working group meetings that led us to these recommendations. So recommendation 1 was that the FCC should partner with other federal agencies and the White House to ensure that there's a comprehensive solution across all agencies that help prevent AI from being used for malicious calling purposes. This recommendation recognizes that AI, particularly how AI is being used and will be used for malicious purposes, is not just an FCC issue, it's an all-of-government issue. This is consistent with things like the White House's October 2023 EO on safe, secure, and trustworthy artificial intelligence, and other directives that seek to promote competition, cooperation, those are 2 different words, but 2 different meanings, cooperation among government agencies to deal with AI risks. So in this recommendation, we encourage the FCC to partner with and benefit from other agencies' efforts in this space, so that can benefit the FCC as it seeks ways to deal with this threat of AI-generated malicious calls. Click to the next one. We'll get there. There we go. So, one too many. This is what happens when you don't wait for the technology to catch up. Okay. How are we doing? One of the things you mentioned, Kayla, was asking that we don't speak too fast. And I know that I have a tendency to be a fast talker. So if the transcription folks are having trouble keeping up, or other folks are having trouble keeping up, let me know so I can slow down. All right, thank you. So on recommendation number 2, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but essentially, because it's somewhat self-explanatory. But essentially, the working group's consensus is that AI-generated calls, the intent of which is to deceive consumers, are always a TCPA violation. We could think of no instances where a consumer would knowingly consent to receiving an AI-generated call that was intended to deceive them. And so what this recommendation asks the FCC to do is to make an explicit declaration on this point, so that any ambiguity around whether a AI-generated call intended to deceive consumers it violates the TCPA. Turning to recommendation number 3. soon as the PowerPoint catches up with me. There we go. Okay. In this recommendation, we recommend that the Commission consider launching, potentially on an expedited basis, a workshop, showcase, or other initiative to encourage voice service providers, analytics providers, and other stakeholders to develop, demonstrate, and implement AI detection and mitigation technologies to block calls identified as likely to contain AI voice cloning. So this recommendation recognizes that there's a wide range of stakeholders who are developing tools every day designated to spot and stop malicious AI-generated calls, and that innovation in this space is happening constantly. The working group believed that the FCC is an ideal convener to bring together those stakeholders and encourage collaboration among them. One of the things that we spent a lot of time talking about in the working group was the FTC's voice cloning challenge, which, if you all aren't familiar with it, essentially earlier this year, the FTC created a challenge with a cash prize for people and companies and individuals to develop technology to start to detect and block voice cloning. And so we really thought that such multidisciplinary approaches aimed at protecting consumers from AI-enabled voice cloning harms were an excellent example of the type of convening power that a federal consumer protection agency has. And so I think this is, asking the Commission to consider launching such a convening. On recommendation number 4, we recommend that the Commission continue to support voice service providers' deployment of current and additional tools and processes to identify, block, and label as appropriate and otherwise mitigate illegal and unwanted calls and texts, including any such calls and texts that are AI-generated, while ensuring appropriate redress mechanisms for legitimate callers. So here we recognized that there are ongoing efforts to support the development and deployment of AI-driven mitigation tools rolled out by voice service providers. Those would be things like consumer-level blocking and labeling tools, network-level blockings, the STIR/SHAKEN, know your customer and know your upstream provider processes, and industry traceback, as well as blocking tools developed by third parties like Umail. In recognition of these efforts, we thought that in recognition of that there needs to be appropriate redress mechanisms. We also acknowledged that these tools, the ones I'm talking about, can inadvertently block legitimate calls. And so we wanted to make sure that there are ways for such activity to be addressed by affected stakeholders. Yeah.
Can advance the slides if you want.
I'm good. I'm good. Thanks, though. I'm a control freak. So on recommendation number 5, the CAC recommends that the Commission consider how risks to privacy and compliance with privacy laws may be impacted by the use of call detection and alerting technologies that monitor the content of calls made to consumers, while the Commission evaluates the potential benefits of these technologies in combating unwanted spam and fraudulent calls. So in this recommendation, we recognize that there are AI tools out there, many of them reliant on things like large language models that are designed to detect scam calls or calls that rely on AI-generated voice. Those tools are being deployed by companies like Google and Microsoft, and I think we sense that there could be significant privacy risks inherent in those tools that would be from the way they work, the monitoring of the content of the calls made to consumers to help those tools work. The working group recommends that the Commission consider those privacy risks that such technology presents while also evaluating their potential benefits. So number 6, the CAC recommends that the Commission consider periodically seeking comment on the state of the AI-generated robocall and robotext threat environment and the technologies being used or developed to address these threats. So this is on a similar theme to recommendation number 3, where we recognize that both the AI threat environment and AI-based mitigation and blocking tools are constantly evolving. Here we're recommending that the FCC initiate a process to proactively solicit input on on the evolution of that threat and the tools, and that they do so on a periodic basis, seeking that input from stakeholders. Talking about recommendations is thirsty work. Recommendation number 7. We are recommending that the Commission encourage collaboration among voice service providers, app developers, handset manufacturers, and other relevant participants to develop tools that can help identify and combat AI used for malicious calling purposes. So this recommendation, what's wrong?
You're on 7. You need the next one.
Oh, did I skip one?
Oh, no, the slides.
Oh, okay. Oh, wait, that's why I didn't.
Slide is on 6.
I didn't advance to 7. There we go. Okay, thank you. Why are you sorry? Save me for myself. Okay, recommendation number 7. This recommendation recognizes that there are other stakeholders in this fight, including app developers, OEMs, and others who have a role to play, and that the FCC is excellently placed to encourage collaboration that helps protect consumers from these threats. So I think the key here in this recommendation is the not just voice service providers, but also app developers, handset manufacturers, and others. And 2 more to go. So this incredibly dense recommendation, I won't go through the whole thing, but feel free to read through it. But earlier when I was talking about the themes, I mentioned how we strove to stick to the scope of the charge, since AI is such a wide-ranging and all-encompassing topic. Here in this recommendation, we look forward to the AI-related topics that we discussed, but we agreed were either out of scope or potentially out of scope with the charge letter, or potentially difficult to reach consensus on. So, for example, the opt-in, opt-out issue, I think we found difficult to reach consensus on. That said, we agreed that the Commission should task a future advisory committee, potentially this committee, potentially a different committee, but always with the inclusion of consumer representatives, with delving into these hard issues that we had a hard time reaching consensus on, or that we thought were out of scope with the charge letter. And finally, recommendation number 9. Here, the working group recognized that there are AI-powered tools that can help people with disabilities communicate in really incredible ways. So, for example, some of the tools we talk about in the report are tools that detect nonverbal communications like eye movement and ASL, tools that enhance voice capabilities for consumers who cannot speak or who have difficulty speaking. We supported the Commission's consideration of whether, in the absence of an exemption being granted by the Commission, such technology may inadvertently run afoul of the TCPA. Yet we caution that an exemption could have the unintended consequence of allowing bad actors to exploit those tools, and that should be considered as well by the Commission. So, we've gotten through all 9 of our working group recommendations. Can I have a round of applause for everybody who worked hard on these recommendations from the working group? This was a lot of last-minute emails from John saying, "Can you please respond to this doodle poll and tell me if you have time in the next 2 days to hop on the phone for an hour with us and talk about this?" So it's very much recognized and appreciated, all the hard work. Let me pause here and see if there are any questions or comments from folks in the room or online about any of this. And so I see Mitzi's card raised. Go ahead, Mitzi.
Well, first, I do want to actually thank John in particular, who did a really good job of herding cats, and I actually want to applaud all the efforts of people who were on the calls. I thought it was very collegial, and people really worked well together, and I actually kind of felt, even though we came from different places, that everybody was working to row the boat in the same direction. One friendly amendment I would request in the printed recommendations, if they could be numbered. It was very helpful on the screen to have the numbering, and I just think that would be helpful in future to actually refer to them if they have numbers in there. And then the second thing I just wanted to add, just as a note to the Federal Communications Commission, one of the charge letters in here was specifically to address how AI could help people with disabilities. When we split up into the 2 working groups, we did not really have any particular focus on that. I think that I would say, as part of a member of the CAC, that I learned actually quite a bit, particularly around AI and generation of sign language. But I think it would be helpful for the commission to find a way. There is an entire disability advisory committee. There was one presentation given by them, but I do think that either finding a way that temporarily a few of those members were part of the CAC, or that particular charge group worked more closely with them. I do feel that was a lost opportunity to get a lot of both valuable input, but also to get some other hands to help with it, because this was a lot of work. And so I just think the reason why we didn't spend more time on that was just, it was a very short time to do it. So that was just one thing. The second thing that I would say is that in the middle, late in the process, the commission, the commissioner or Chairwoman Rosenworcel pre-released the draft AI recommendations that the commission was going to take up in September. There was an incredibly useful bit of information in there, particularly around definitions of AI, and the commission in that order is specifically asking for advice. That came to us after we had spent 2 or 3 months working through the definition of what should be AI. Even though we had the briefing in April, to know that the commission was that far along and there had been that much time and effort put into it, it would have been more efficient, I think, to find a way for at least that research to have been shared with the CAC in advance. I could easily see that if we had started in that place, there certainly could have been around that. I get that there can be a benefit to coming through things from different angles, but I do think that in future CACs, that particularly where you have these issues where there's been a lot of research, there should be a better way to share that, because for everybody here, I think everybody did, particularly John, and Margaret, there are a lot of people, Josh, there are a lot of people I think who spent extra time, and a lot of us just come and read the work that other people did. But I do think that that would be helpful, and the commission should be more mindful that when you have already done research, to share that with the CAC and to really help the process. So, but again, I want to thank all the members on Working Group 1, and to thank John in particular.
Great. Thank you, Mitzi, for that input. Before I see if there are other questions, and I do see one over here from Lily, Mitzi did put forward a friendly amendment to number the recommendations. I think that would be a valuable addition, but I don't know if we need to consider that as something that's sort of a non-technical or a non-substantive change that we can just make to the final report, or if we need to have a vote on that. Like, what's the ruling from the judges?
I think if you're going to vote on the report, it can just all be together.
Just all be together?
Yeah.
Yeah. I just didn't know if it was actually like. Okay. Great. Then hearing, if there are no objections to that, then we'll go ahead and just make that change. Okay, I see Lily and then Brent.
Thank you so much. I wanted to say a huge thank you, John, for the leadership, and huge thank you for all the team members that were part of the group. I learned so much from you all, and especially just extra shout out to Margaret and Josh. I think there was a really good balance of making sure we were approaching a very technical part of the report in a way that also addressed some of the concerns of both privacy, but also on understanding what are some of the current practices and what's possible. So just thank you for that, because I honestly learned so much from you all, and reading the final piece after all the different comments is very digestible, and I'm excited for folks to be able to read it. On that note, I know one of the issues that we had was like the scoping. So I'll share a little bit of like future recommendations that I do think that this is a really great capture of where we're at now. I do recommend that we stay abreast, that these types of opportunities and reports continue to be refreshed. I think the timing of them maybe every year, depending on what's possible, but I do think that, especially aligning as to what was mentioned, there's a lot of new guidelines coming out from the different agencies that I think will be great to make sure this stays relevant, such as stuff coming out from FTC, NIST, CFPB, DOJ, and others. The other part too, there's a line in the report that looks at really increasing more of the transparency, accountability, and collaboration with the providers as these technologies are moving quickly, but to be able to also do it more accurately. So for the future, if there's a way to look at public benchmarks, more public opportunity to analyze the detection and the prevention, especially being able to ensure that there's representative data, meaning part of recommendation number 8 was to make sure that there's more consumers that are representative of the consumers that can participate in helping provide more, especially those that tend to have more disparate impact in these areas. And last question is maybe overall, will the report be available in multiple languages, especially Spanish? Because I'm excited to share with my mom who's tuning in, watching us right now.
So Lily, I can speak to the last question. We have not talked about sort of making the report available in Spanish, but I think we can have a conversation about doing that after it. But I definitely would agree with you that there would be value in making it available in additional languages. So, I see Brent, and then I'll come to Anne-Marie.
Thanks, John. So it seems like quite a few of the recommendations were focused on being able to detect the use of AI in robocalls, developing technologies, for example, that would help detect. And I was just curious if the committee had also considered requesting that the AI companies flag their AI content so that when it then is potentially used in robocalls, it'll be easier for these companies to detect the AI, because it seems it'd be easier then, of course, if the AI content was pre-flagged by the companies providing those services, as opposed to trying to detect it in other ways afterwards.
So let me drill down to that a little bit, Brent. Are you asking, when you say AI companies, I'm understanding that to mean like the OpenAI or sort of the people who are actually people who behind ChatGPT and Gemini and things like that? Is that who you're referring to?
Yeah, absolutely. I know they're not necessarily under the jurisdiction of the FCC, but on the other hand, some of the companies that are building these technology tools may not be as well.
Yeah. I'll defer to some of my colleagues who are on the working group calls, but at least on working group 1, I don't recall that being a topic that we had conversations about. Am I misremembering here? Okay, I see Mitzi and Margot want to weigh in on that, so go ahead.
I think that we focused on AI voice-generated calls once the FCC's NPRM came out, which is different than what you're addressing. So I think the answer is we have not focused on AI-driven calls and texts that do not include AI-generated voice. To distinguish, I'm guessing here, I'd like correction from anyone who can provide it. I think AI calls that involve AI that do not include AI voice generated would be the use of pre-recorded voice in a way that is manipulated by AI, and that has already been determined to be covered as considered a TCPA protected activity. Whether or not we would recommend as a group that the same treatment for those calls be applied to those calls as the FCC is considering applying to AI voice-generated calls is a separate topic, but I'm not sure there's that many distinctions that matter. Josh, do you have an opinion on this?
Not necessarily on that, but I think I agree. I mean, the other thing I was going to add is just consistent with the charge letter. I think we were very focused on malicious calling, and so I think we were running with the assumption that the malicious actors will not be doing. So we weren't focused on authorized voice cloning. We were focused on malicious voice cloning, right? So I think that was, some of it was, that didn't necessarily enter the conversation because we were assuming malicious intent in the calling we were trying to detect, where they may not follow the rules.
Yeah, I think if you look at recommendation 2 on page 5, a big chunk of what AI is everywhere. It is, if you had to sit there and say, okay, I want you to flag anything that was created using ChatGPT or Copilot or Gemini, that it becomes something that people would ignore because everything falls into that. And the focus, and you can see in there specifically, to Margot's point about the voice, because the other recorded ones would fall under other orders, but it's specifically, it was the intent to defraud or harm. So there is a difference between, I've simply used AI to generate someone that tells you your bill is due and I want to make it sound like a human, versus I have used AI to impersonate an elected official and tell you where to go vote. So I think that's, we did not, for that reason, then go and focus on the AI companies, but we were really much more, the intent and the harm was much more the focus.
Thanks, Mitzi. Brent, does that answer your question?
Yeah, definitely. It certainly makes sense from that context. My hope would be that, well, you know, some of the companies that have the capability of generating AI content would honor a request to flag their content in a way that then when the bad actors try to use their tools, you know, that's already pre-flagged by the companies that actually have the capability of generating that kind of content. So I do appreciate the committee's looking into this, and that, it certainly makes a lot of sense to me. But it is a challenging matter to try to detect AI after the fact, I think.
Absolutely. So Anne Marie has been waiting patiently, so I'll go to her, and then after her, I'll go to Mickey.
That's okay. Thank you, John. I just wanted to make a comment. Recommendation first, foremost, I applaud the working group number 1 for your tireless efforts in this process. It was really inspiring to see language for people with disabilities as part of your recommendations. I do want to reiterate what Mincy shared. She beat me to the punch, and that is, I think it's so important for the next CSC consideration. As a member of the DAC as well, I had a tough time deciding between the 2 working groups because they both were equally very important. The only reason I chose the outreach is because exposure and visibility to communications is so vital. So I'd like to propose, adding on to what Mitzi has shared, is take that into consideration and having maybe more than 1 representative, not necessarily have to be from DAC, but could be representative of the community who are involved in AI. We provided some training or overview of that, but it's not only for people who are deaf and hard of hearing. Statistics show that 1 in 4 people with disabilities will be exposed to potential undue harm to AI. So I would encourage the CSC to take that into consideration, maybe a little bit more balance and representation for the CSC. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne Marie. Mickey.
I was just going to reflect on some of the discussions that happened, that this topic wasn't completely unmentioned, and that we did talk about the general use of AI beyond the scope of what we were talking about in this. And we determined that it was pretty much beyond the scope. But there was the notice that, and the analogy I remember was if you flagged every time someone used a search engine, using Google or something else. It's analogous to this, is that the use of AI is becoming so common in everyday usage that it's going to be hard, if not impossible, to flag everything like that. But what I think we can do is look at what is worthy of notification, again, the intent to do harm, and if something is significantly generated through AI, that there's some kind of notice there, Brent, that could, if we could figure a way to codify that.
Thank you, Mickey. And all this is on the record, so you know the SC is taking notes on all of this, so we'll take all of this back. I'm going to let Mitzi have the last word, and then in the interest of time, I'm going to move to Claudia's presentation.
I just wanted to quickly flag, Brent, on the last piece of it. If you look at the recommendations on page 8, we did have significant discussion about the tools that companies are already using their ability, Margot can maybe say which is the company that. Umail, which flags bad actors. And that recommendation is intended both to get to that, and then the following recommendation is also to look and see what would be the privacy implications, because the only way you're going to get to some of this stuff is that you actually are looking at it.
That's something different.
Something different. Okay, but in any event, the recommendation, the top recommendation on page 8 is intended to get to the issue that there are companies, they have detection tools, they have the ability to do those.
Thank you, Mitzi. Thank you, everybody, for the thoughtful questions and feedback. Like I said, the commission is taking copious notes, and I hear David typing away over there, and I've been taking notes as well. So thank you for that. I'm going to hand the mic over now to Claudia to talk about the recommendations from Working Group 2.
Thank you for that. It was really great to hear all about Working Group 1's, the process and the thought that went behind each of the recommendations. So I really appreciate Working Group 1's really hard work on all of that. I was overseeing Working Group 2. Like John had mentioned, we decided early on to break up into 2 working groups. My working group, which was Working Group 2, decided to focus on the outreach and consumer education portion of the charge letter, which was number 6 in that list that we were given. And I think our group was really well primed and positioned to provide the kind of recommendations that we did. I think I can just speak personally. It was really great to see such a diverse set of community voices. I think just about every community that we could tend to talk about in sort of the consumer advocacy and civil rights space had some kind of representative or had some kind of voice at the table when we were going through these recommendations. And I think that was what really was our guiding star was, the charge we decided to take up may have been narrow, but we decided and were able to go especially deep and be very thoughtful and intentional in making recommendations that could actually maximize the Commission's consumer outreach and education work stream and make sure that it was not only effective, but it was also reaching, the most impacted and vulnerable groups who are struggling as AI continues to evolve and become more mainstream. So with that, I will kind of dive into the presentation. I'll talk a little bit, just like John did, about our working group process. Our group included 17 working group participants representing a broad spectrum of CAC member organizations, like I kind of mentioned. We decided to have a special focus on charge letter questions related to outreach and education. I think it was the idea, and I think it was kind of to dovetail with what Anne-Marie was saying earlier, is that, it's great, a lot of the great work that Working Group 1 did, right? It's all for naught if we're not communicating that back to consumers and empowering consumers with the tools to actually operationalize some of the goals, right, that were embedded in Working Group 1's recommendations. So that's why we really wanted to be intentional and thoughtful about that. Since May, we had 7 working group meetings. Again, I think because our charge was a little bit narrow, we were able to come to consensus, a pretty strong consensus pretty early on, and it became more about devil in the details and just making sure that we're being intentional about maximizing inclusivity, not only in the ways in which we structure the recommendations, but even in just the language that we use throughout the recommendations. I was about to say next slide. And so I'll also cover a little bit of the themes that we considered, which I did kind of touch on already. But we had broad agreement on a multi-channel inclusive consumer education campaign. So pretty early on, we decided right away that what we wanted to do was sketch out our vision for what a consumer outreach and education campaign would look like around educating consumers about not only the potential harms and risks associated with AI-generated robocalls or robotexts, but then also what were some of the affirmative use cases for AI. And one of that was in particular for vulnerable communities, like the disability community, for example. Another major theme was maximizing community-level reach and engaging diverse and impacted groups. So again, we really wanted to be focused on on communities and the consumer. So making sure that we're meeting consumers where they are at, depending on their own impacted group or their vulnerability profiles, or other kind of unique markers that are, or any other markers that are unique to various communities and stakeholder groups. And then the last thing that I'm going to say is that throughout you'll see that the recommendations overall of generating and standing up this kind of holistic, broad campaign the entire campaign hangs on this idea of providing or messaging on a 3R response. The 3 R's being empowering consumers to recognize, react, and report appropriately and safely when an unwanted or malicious robocall or robotext is received. So those were kind of the major themes that emerged and surfaced as we kind of started talking about what a successful consumer education campaign would look like when it comes to AI robocalls and robotexts. I keep wanting to say next. Okay, so we're going to pick up at recommendation number 10. So I'm going to go ahead and just read it out. It kind of just expands on what I just mentioned. So this recommendation reads that the CAC recommends that the Commission develop national public education and engagement efforts based on a 3R response to empower consumers to recognize, react, and report appropriately and safely when an unwanted and malicious robocall or robotext is received. I'm going to kind of go through that one. I think it's a little self-explanatory. The next recommendation that we had was the CAC recommends that the Commission develop this campaign and related materials in partnership with organizations that have ties to underserved and hard-to-reach communities. This includes the creation of modular content easily adapted for different languages, cultural contexts, and specific vulnerability profiles. So what I wanted to also kind of flag here before we keep going is that you'll notice that our recommendations kind of scale from very broad and large down to a little bit more detailed. So I would say that this recommendation follows on to recommendation number 10 in the sense that we really wanted to underline and emphasize to the Commission that even before you stand up this campaign, there needed to be a lot of consumer engagement on the front end before you even kind of delve into structuring what a successful campaign would look like. And so we really wanted to deliver the message that and encourage the Commission to right away get started in engaging community groups, community anchor institutions, community-based organizations, grassroots groups, really kind of getting into understanding what are the needs of consumers, of vulnerable consumers, and specific impacted groups. One-size-fits-all campaigns are rarely effective, and so what this recommendation aims to do is to kind of help the Commission orient who they're speaking to, what consumers they're speaking to before they start delivering messaging and education materials. Recommendation number 12 reads, the CAC recommends that the Commission design a multi-channel and multimodal campaign dissemination plan to ensure broad reach and reinforcement of the education campaign. The Commission should develop a campaign dissemination plan in partnership with organizations that have ties to underserved and hard-to-reach communities to maximize reach, accessibility, and impact. So you'll see here this recommendation is hyper-focused on the dissemination plan once a campaign is actually developed and materials are produced. Again, a campaign is only as strong as its reach, and so what this recommendation aims to get at is really reinforcing this idea that we had to be holistic, or that the Commission should be holistic and thoughtful in the ways it's going to reach various consumer groups and impacted groups. So some of those groups that come to mind include communities like rural communities, right, who may not even have the same kind of digital access to even access some of the materials, who may not even have any kind of familiarity with artificial intelligence, right, as a result of lacking connectivity. So they're communicating with that group, right, requires different strategies and activities than communicating with, let's say, limited English speakers or LGBTQI communities. Or the disability community. And so what this recommendation aims to do is really kind of encourage the Commission to have a lot of critical assessment in what a dissemination plan would look like so that we're reaching and touching as many consumers as possible. Recommendation 13. The CAC recommends that the Commission should establish and maintain ongoing partnerships with community anchor institutions and organizations with strong community and grassroots ties in support of an education and awareness campaign. This recommendation really aims at making sure that that we encourage the commission to partner with trusted messengers. It's really, as somebody who works on behalf of an impacted community, it's very hard sometimes to disseminate messaging in a meaningful and effective way if you don't have the correct messenger to deliver this message. And so this recommendation really looks at making sure that the commission is working in partnership with community leaders and with community messengers, and not necessarily doing this work in a vacuum, or the commission doing it on its own. I would like to think that our working group 2, is sort of an example of what this would look like, as our working group included community representatives from impacted groups. And so I think that that's sort of the same thing, or the same kind of process, whether the commission intended to do that, right? I think that's something, a good start and a place to start for the commission once it decides on a campaign, if it would like to engage in a campaign, develop a dissemination strategy, and then, partner with messengers. Recommendation 14. Oh, I'm back.
You're back.
The CAC recommends that the commission develop a train the trainers model to grow community capacity and resilience to safely and appropriately respond to and report unwanted AI-generated robocalls and robotexts. So you'll see we're getting a little bit more, these recommendations are beginning to get a little bit more in the weeds and get a little bit more tactful and activity-oriented. And so what we really wanted to uplift, and doubling down on the idea of partnering with trusted messengers, is that we also, one way to build community resilience and even empower consumers themselves, right, to be their own advocates and to protect themselves and navigate this new AI world safely. One of those ways is to have neighbors train each other, for example, right? Have communities work together and empower one another to be able to grasp, right? What are the risks of AI and AI-generated robocalls and robotexts? But then also, what are the ways that you can work together? What are solutions that that communities can develop together, not only within the community, but then kind of look outwards and engage technologists, engage government, engage right across communities. And I think the one vehicle that we thought that would really maximize the ability to do that is developing a train the trainers model to make sure that we're really kind of arriving at holistically developed solutions for ways that communities can engage with AI safely. Recommendation 15. The CAC recommends that the commission integrate an AI robocall and robotext education campaign with broadband access and literacy initiatives. So again, this one was very detailed, but it was very intentional because of the fact that the commission has already done, a great job in the past of launching other kind of consumer awareness campaigns. One campaign that the working group specifically uplifted and taught and discussed was the Affordable Connectivity Program, or ACP, or even before that, EBB, the Emergency Broadband Benefit, and the really great job that the commission did in sort of advertising and highlighting, right, the availability of these programs. So what we wanted to do was kind of, right, continue that work and kind of expand, right, no need to reinvent the wheel, but let's pick up from all the great work that had already been done and the foundation that had been laid with initiatives like those. The other reason we really wanted to include this recommendation, and I would point to it, is that the introduction and the mainstreaming and really the speed with which AI is evolving, it's really extending the digital divide, which was something that was also, right, a core issue for a lot of the working group too, was, right, we now have to talk about AI when the majority of the communities, or a lot of the people, a lot of households in the communities that each of the working group members represented are already caught in the digital divide and already lack access to broadband or home internet. They lack digital skills, they lack devices. So now to have to communicate about something as sophisticated as AI seems a little daunting, and I think it's necessary. We all thought that therefore it was necessary to kind of integrate and embed and kind of treat this sort of AI education campaign as an extension and as sort of like an outgrowth of the pre-existing broadband access and literacy initiatives that the commission already works on and engages in. Recommendation 16, the CAC recommends that the commission expand and further promote its consumer inquiries and complaints center. I think this again dovetails with our goal, our working group's goal of wanting to make it so that consumers can advocate for themselves, protect themselves, access resources to help them or their friends or their loved ones who they know have maybe had a negative impact as a result of AI. And so another thing we wanted to really make sure that we conveyed to the Commission was the importance of ensuring that part of this campaign includes expanding and kind of lifting the visibility and accessibility of its existing consumer inquiries and complaints center. I think, right, just as the AI space continues to evolve so rapidly and so quickly, we need to find ways in which we're keeping pace, right, and in the ways in which we're communicating, right, the advances that we're seeing to consumers, but also making sure that we are also augmenting the processes that are available to consumers when it comes to reporting on harms or risks or potential risks that are produced by AI. Yeah, and that was it. One thing I might kind of close out with before I open it up to questions, comments, or feedback is, which I didn't really get into in too much detail when I was going through the recommendations. But if you go through the report itself, you'll see a lot of detail, getting really down into the nitty-gritty of, what should signs or flyers even look like, what's appropriate font, what are the list of languages, what are some mechanisms to use, what are mechanisms to avoid. You'll see those, explained in great detail in our report, and there's no way I could capture, right, the level of detail in just running through these. But I would invite and encourage everyone to kind of look through that, not only for any kind of additional recommendations or thoughts that you may have or that you may want to suggest to the Commission, maybe for a future CAC, but even just to think through, right. I think everybody on this committee and the entire CAC, right, thinks through these issues every day and how we're kind of engaging and protecting consumers. And so I think thinking about, what else is there? What are other creative ways that we can make sure that we're keeping pace with the evolution of technology is something that I would really invite all of you to do. So I'll stop there. I welcome, and I'll open the floor to any questions or comments. We have Debbie right up. Go ahead.
Carefully pushing the correct button. Yeah, first of all, Claudia, a fantastic job in producing all of our recommendations, getting this all together. I was in this outreach working group, but I know the amount of background work that you did was tremendous, so thank you so much. I offer this up not as an amendment, but as something to consider how we approach this and how the future CAC might address this and offer this as perhaps a recommendation. We have some excellent thought here in the outreach section, but I do know, having worked on a number of these outreach campaigns in previous years with the FCC, that there are costs involved and staff involved in trying to implement these sorts of programs. And I think we might want to consider how we help support that and how we offer thought on what kind of staffing or perhaps reshuffling of staff and resources are needed to try and implement some of the recommendations that we offer in this report. Having seen some of the campaigns in the past, some of them have received additional funding. So that is something that we might want to consider, how we address that. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Debbie. Ryan.
I'll start by saying, again, thank you, Claudia, and thank you to everybody who was on working group 2. I was on all of those calls, and it was kind of a long slog to get through all of the nitty-gritty and the weeds that ended up in these recommendations. So I applaud everyone who was on that. And one of the things that I want to mention is not an amendment, but potentially maybe an implementation note on recommendation 16 on the complaint process, specifically highlighting things like the way that the Commission has done with the digital discrimination portion of its complaint website, insofar as potentially breaking out AI robocalls and that complaint kind of area into its own particular section of the website, just given kind of how pervasive this problem is becoming, how much information there is out there that both the commission is going to generate, has already generated, and the ease of which we would like people to be able to submit these complaints. So having a very clear area in which they are able to go that is not kind of muddled with all of the other areas in which they can complain. So I would just offer that as a potential implementation note.
Thank you for that, Ryan. Amina.
Not adding an amendment, but I wanted to make a note around implementation that on the train the trainers recommendation, I feel like there is a real opportunity for the FCC to serve as a clearinghouse. A lot of the organizations that are listed as really important distribution partners likely need support just understanding AI, and there's so much information that's changing. Being a trusted source for what will be high quality information, I think will be really valuable to the field. And there isn't another entity in the federal government that's doing this kind of work or built to do this kind of work. So I think in addition to the field that you're trying to serve, you may actually serve a purpose that will extend further for consumers facing AI products. I also wanted to make a point about the complaint process. Again, similarly in implementation, this may be something that's already done in a whole of government approach, but because AI is so new, this is an incredible opportunity to be able to track instances of AI harms and abuses, something, again, that is not being done across the government and is unique at the FCC. So that could be really helpful information as other parts of the federal government are considering consumer protections, impacts of AI. So that data gathering as through the complaint process could be one consideration that could lead back to earlier pages where you were talking about the whole of government approach.
Thank you for that. Those were all really great. I want to say the last thing, we did include actually in our last recommendation related to the Complaint Center, we also suggested or recommended that the commission could conduct a comprehensive demographic study based on some of the complaints that it receives through that process. So great flag, thank you. We'll go over to Lily.
Try to go real fast.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think the last two comments there was agreement, at least on my part, as you were sharing, of the opportunity here to really expand that AI literacy infrastructure that's been created through past programs, through the FCC's ACP and EBB, et cetera. And I do think that the clearinghouse is super critical because of a lot of mis and disinfo, as we've seen, even, there's a lot of effort there of making sure the folks are being educated with the right tools. The other part too, I think part of the funding and implementation side is, could there be a way, I know the digital, from the NTIA and other agencies as well, there are current funding opportunities for the FCC going forward. There's just a universal line that starts to embed, you could use funding for AI literacy in support to increase some of these efforts as well. I think could be helpful for those things that are on deck already. The other two comments, feedback, I think maybe for future volumes would be, one, to prioritize learnings, right? So you shared the report goes into a lot of details. Would be interesting to see what does it look like for a prototype of that to be rolled out and prioritize activities to the point of implementation and costs. And then the other part is the reporting and redressing of specific AI harms that have been caused. And I think Brent's point earlier is trying to bring how can we push for more sophisticated but yet user-friendly watermarking, both on audio and text, is still a thing to deal with. But I do think that it's really critical to make sure that we're doing that. And from my previous comments earlier, to make sure that we're also going back and putting in even more due diligence on the providers, app developers, all the organizations that are in the entire stack, from whether it's the origination of the text or the call before it gets to the user, as much as possible because of how these technologies at scale work. And one last idea, recommendation for future things to also connect the first group to this group would be, could there be a community challenge, the same way that there was an AI challenge that was done in the group one's recommendation? Could there be another community or outreach challenge that can also help connect some of those data gaps that will better inform all the providers, all the, the intermediaries, but also the community? And so how can we also embed those representative data sets into those areas to connect those two activities in an ongoing effort? And just saying also great work to everyone. I know that there's a lot, so just thank you so much for all the depth for it.
Thanks so much for that, Lily. All right, I think we're going to go over to David. Go ahead, Faith. Thank you, David.
Thank you. Claudia, first of all, thank you. You really did a fantastic job in putting this together. And this is very detailed recommendations, right? And if we only follow, the true marketing and outreach, the true complaint center, the consumer inquiries, we will really move a needle and protect those that are being harmed. And based on my experience, these nonprofits also have operations budget, right? So I would really highly recommend to include that the nonprofits that are boots on the ground, that are already doing a lot of services, providing a lot of government subsidies, nonprofits, and those nonprofits that are very, very effective, but yet they are not known in the in the government, or because they don't get funding. I just cannot emphasize enough that there's got to be an allocation of a budget. And I understand the budget, the FCC cannot spend money. And however, these CAC members and other community groups can educate the Congress, right? I mean, there's no more money on the ACP, but we can continue this marketing and outreach. But the nonprofits will only do it effectively when there is a funding. So I hope the FCC can really make that like a big footnote, that all of these recommendations are only good when there's a proper implementation. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Faith. All right, seeing no other hands or tents. Okay, great. And I think we're actually right on time. So I will pass it back to, do I pass it back to now? Oh, we're going on to the vote. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for all of that, for the thoughtful input. Before we move to the vote, I did want to acknowledge I missed some folks who deserve to be recognized when we were doing the roll call. Those are some of our very, very hardworking alternates. So many folks in this room had alternates who jumped in at the last minute and helped out with a lot, and many of them are in the room, so I just wanted to take a moment to recognize them. We have Angela DeMahie from AT&T. We have Eden Ishil from NCL, the best member of the CAC. We have Margot Saunders, who you heard from earlier. We have Rick Elrod from NATOA, and Sarah from CTA over here. So thank you very much to all of our alternates and all of your hard work. It definitely did not go unnoticed, so thank you. Okay, so with all of that done, we come to the most fun part of the day. Is there any other questions or concerns or feedback that folks would like to raise at this time before we moved to a vote on the CAC's report and recommendations? Speak now or forever hold your peace. Oh, Mitzi, go ahead.
I just do want to second that I really do think it would be helpful to release this report in Spanish, recommendations in Spanish.
Yes.
Oh, wait, can I actually?
Go ahead,
I meant to refer to that. Yes, that would actually also be in line with the translating the report. This report would also be in line with a lot of the recommendations that we had around language access for working group too. I did thank you for that reminder.
And I will add my +1 to that. So, great, thank you, Mitzi. So, seeing no other tent cards raised, I think it's time for us to move to a vote. Would someone like to make a motion to adopt the report and recommendation with Mitzi's friendly amendment on numbering?
So moved.
Debbie Berlin from Project Goal makes a motion. Do I hear a second? Second from Ryan Johnson at Next Century Cities. So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of adopting the CAC 12 2024 report and recommendation, please say aye.
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 Great. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Fantastic. Welcome. Oh, wait. Premature? Okay, so CTIA Sarah Legan is abstaining. Great. Well, with that, I think we can say that we have successfully passed our report and recommendations. Now you can clap. Thank you very, very much. This has been a great process and a great group of folks to work with. And can I get a special round of applause for my co-chair, Claudia Ruiz here?
No. We're going to be clapping all day because we have to clap for
We have
you
to clap.
too.
Yeah, people have to get planes later on, so I don't want to keep you forever. I think now, so we're going to move into the public comment here in a section. When we're done with that and we adjourn, don't leave because we do need you to stick around for our class photo. Just wanted to put that out there. So I will hand the mic over back to David Perez for our public comment period.
Thank you, John. Just as a reminder, Kayla said if you're watching online or if you're here in the room, you can email live questions at fcc.gov for the public comment period. We don't have any that have been collected earlier, but we'll give folks just a moment to do that. Again, that's live questions at fcc.gov. So as John mentioned, for the photo earlier, I'll just make this announcement while we wait for any questions to come in. We're going to have to move the monitor here. So just give us about 5 minutes to move that out of the way, and then we can walk towards up here on top of the dais and get the photographer to take the official photo. So I'm just checking if there's any questions. I don't see any. Renee saying there's no public comment. Anyone in the room? Okay, so we have not received any public comment at this time.
Great. And Alejandro asked me to remind everybody that if you are still interested in serving on CAC 13, lucky number CAC 13, please do make sure that you express that interest to Kayla and to David. It's been a pleasure to work with you all. I would be honored to work with you all again if you decide that this is a good use of your time. So with that, I think we can move to adjourn the final meeting of CAC 12, and then we'll pause while we move stuff out of the way. Anything, Kayla, David, Miriam, Alejandro, that we need to do? All right. In that case, thank you very much for your service, and we are adjourned.